I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
Jay, you know what my favorite type of restaurant is?
Yep.
Restaurants that totally think out of the box. Like, I love having breakfast at dinner time, for instance, and I've always loved this. And so it was great reading Jeremy Fall's book, Falling Upwards. He's a restaurant guy, a nightclub guy, a bar guy, but also just started a record label, has worked with Jay-Z, Quincy Jones, CNN, been involved in the NFT space. But his first restaurant that he started in LA was a breakfast at dinner time restaurant that also was a bar / nightclub / whatever. And then he's expanded his creativity in all these different directions, which is inspirational. But this book that he just wrote, Falling Upwards, is all about him dealing with anxiety at the same time, this anxiety disorder, something that I can strongly relate to over the decades of my own career. And just really refreshing talking to him, both about creativity, about food, about restaurants, about anxiety and how you deal with that. So here he is, Jeremy Fall, author of Falling Upwards and also the creator of so many restaurants and other creative ideas.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
Yeah, really enjoyed Falling Upwards. Really good.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
I always schedule these things to finish right before the podcast starts. And I was just really enjoying it. I felt it was really well written.
Did you just finish it, like today?
Yeah, I just finished it today.
Oh, wow. That's
I pace these things because I do 3 podcasts a week. I pace my reading so that I know I'm going to finish the book the day of.
That's awesome.
By the way, one thing, Jeremy, I was totally psyched when I started reading the book and realized you're into my favorite type of food combination, specifically breakfast for dinner. I'm a huge breakfast for dinner fan.
Absolutely. I mean, as am I. That was what started my career.
Before we get into like the meat of your book, why do you think people don't usually do breakfast for dinner? It's like such a natural thing to have something sweet, like pancakes or French toast or something, along with some savory stuff at dinner.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I think, and there's probably a lot of history there where a lot of what American breakfasts are made of were actually, influenced by Wall Street because, all of those like oranges and all these different products were essentially what Wall Street had the most backing in at the time. So this whole orange juice, glass of milk, eggs and bacon, all these things reflect that. But to me, I think it's a very nostalgic meal. Maybe it's because it was before we'd go to school in the morning or whatever it is. I think it's just like this very comforting morning, first meal of the day. You're the most energized. People always say that dinners are very social. I've always thought breakfasts were social because like when you meet someone for breakfast, or I've had so many breakfast meetings, I've been insanely productive. It's like the first thing of the day, you're not tired. Your brain hasn't done a million different things yet. So with that said, I think it's this very comforting thing, and breakfast for dinner kind of feels like, it's like a treat. Like maybe when we were kids, like it was something you didn't do. I don't know if there's some sort of forbidden thing about it. I'm not sure, but it seems like it's such a thing for everyone.
Yeah, but you would think though, like people always crash, for instance, after breakfast if they have like
Yeah,
pancakes or heavy carbs. Whereas if you eat like a heavy dinner, steak, alcohol, the whole thing, you tend to not fall asleep after dinner unless you
true.
eat dinner like many hours before sleep. So it would just seem, in terms of our sleep cycles, dinner would be better at breakfast and breakfast would be better at dinner. But all aside from just the taste and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of actual like cultures that their breakfasts are very savory, forward, and mimic things that we would have for dinner. For the traditional breakfast in the U.S. is definitely like not the standard for everywhere, right? So no, I've always thought that was interesting. But I'm glad that you're a fellow breakfast for dinner fan.
So in your book, you started off with kind of the pop-up, what would you call it, bar genesis.
Yep.
And you were only 23 years old, and you approached this other club promoter that you worked with closely, Jared, to open that up. I think that was very inspirational in terms of like how you got your start, that people aren't just given opportunities. You have to kind of like reach out and really have ideas and get your opportunity for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you could describe how that happened, and then
Yeah, people always ask me like the question I always get is how did you get your start? And I mean obviously if you trace it back to my really really young days, I started as a busboy in a restaurant. I mean, I don't think there's a direct correlation to that like necessarily where that's like a step you have to take. I mean, I learned a lot in terms of hospitality from like a skill standpoint, but to me it's like I think the biggest thing that I attribute my success to that I just have never thought about is going for something. And I know that seems like a little bit cliche, but I don't know if it's because I'm a sociopath or whatever it is, but if I have an idea, I literally do it. Like I don't have a filter there. And I think that I don't know what that is. And maybe that is attributed to mental illness or whatever it is. And I talk about, obviously the book is a heavy mental health focused book,
right.
But like I've never not tried. Like, last year, actually no, this year's within the last year, I was like, you know what? I had never like really done art before, but I've done little bit things, but I was just like, cool, I'm going to do this art piece. And I collaborated with CNN and dropped a Nelson Mandela inspired piece for the anniversary of his release from prison. And there was no question, and obviously I'm a creative person, like that's something I know, but like there was no question that I could just be an artist and do that, and like a fine artist in that sense, and did it. And piece actually did really well. And then that led to them wanting me to do something for a gun control campaign. But there's never been an opportunity presented to me that I wanted to do that I was like, oh, I wish I could, but I can't. I mean, obviously I can't be a heart surgeon, right? Or like there are limitations to that. But ultimately, I wanted to be in restaurants. I just figured it out. I want to do this. I just figured it out. Like there's no option for me to not figure something out. And I think that the way my brain's wired, that I think that's what's really helped everything, because a lot of times it's fear that stops us.
I mean, fear stops us. And I think there's two other things that you must have some conceptual relationship with. One, of course, is failure, because you don't reach out to do things as much as you do if you're also not willing to fail. Because most things that we attempt will fail if we attempt lots of things.
I will fail more times the rest of my life than I will succeed. That's for sure. It's like, but it's funny. Like there was once a couple times when I was younger, I was throwing these like all age events. It's kind of starting in nightlife. I would get this venue, charge $20 at the door. It was kids who were like 12 to 17, kind of like a better version of a school dance, right? And it was like this, and it was a great idea. I still think it's actually, today is a little bit different, but some people, like, it wasn't as successful as I thought. It literally is one of the focus. It's mentioned in my book. It's in every interview I've done. But so in that sense, if I look at that, that was a failure on paper from a revenue standpoint, from however you want to quantify it. But like, it was part of my story. I talk about it now. It's a good talking point that I've repurposed, right? And so, is it a failure? Like, I also think that maybe like my conception of failing is skewed, or it's just, and I'm not trying to say like I don't believe in it. Like, I'm not trying to sound like a, this like business book, but I don't really think about it. I think a lot of entrepreneurs very much focus on financial capital, and I focus on like personal achievement. So even if something is not a commercial success, which by the way is good and bad, right? Because to a certain extent, like as a business person, like there needs to be some sort of financial, success, right? For businesses and supporting people and everything. But I think when I look at it, I'm like, I look at so many things that I've done that have built so much social capital, right? Like so many things over the years that I've done that if you read my book, like the vast majority of things mentioned here, like didn't directly correlate to making money, like at all. But those stories and those things I've done allowed me to write a book and get published by one of the biggest publishers in the world. So it's how you look at it.
No, I agree. I think I almost think that's the danger of labeling oneself as an entrepreneur, is that then you're contextualizing success or failure in terms of money. Did your entrepreneurship succeed or fail? That means did the business succeed financially or fail financially? And I always kind of think, if you get, as you mentioned earlier, if you get a story out of it, if it becomes an experience that is a tattoo on your life, basically, then that's a success. So like this, and like you had social impact with the Mandela NFT, like that's all those things are important, as opposed to, you're right. I think we sometimes, because money is a path to freedom, we sometimes get just consumed by it as opposed to just putting it in its rightful place.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at Forbes top right of the billionaires, right? Like, first of all, well, depending on who is in is Jeff Bezos today more successful than Elon Musk, tomorrow more successful than Bill Gates the day after? Like, I don't know if success is measured at that point. Like, I think there comes a point where there are people that are, you look at someone like Dan Gilbert, who's lower on the list, obviously still high up there, and he's done so many amazing.
What a failure!
Exactly, right? Like, he's done so many amazing things and revitalized Detroit and paid his employees during the pandemic. Like, that's pretty successful to me. Like, I don't know. There's people, and even going on a much more relatable side, like there are people who have net worths in the under $100,000, and I would say are just as successful as Jeff Bezos. Like, I don't think that that's the metric. It depends how you quantify it. So once you look at success as like it's like essentially being able to carve your own path and make your own rules, I think the measure is a lot easier to digest. Like, I think it allows you to just take more risk, make smarter decisions, and not try to mimic someone else's path, because essentially that's how you're going to fail, is if you try to reduce something someone else has.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid, colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
When you're doing this first thing you did, you approached this guy, Jared. He right away gave you this opportunity to do this pop-up bar above one of his clubs.
Mhm.
And that first attempt at success, though, and we're going to talk about your anxiety. It's something you and I share. Do you feel like that first attempt at breaking out of the box, at making a name for yourself, were you a little more anxious there, or did youth kind of fuel confidence?
That's a great question. I mean, youth definitely now when I look back, I'm like, holy shit. Are we allowed to cuss on this? Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, of
I was
course.
like, holy shit. Like,
We only cuss
yeah,
on
I was
this.
going to say, I need to catch up. But some of the things I'm like, I had more balls back then than I do now. You know what I mean? So youth definitely is in there. I am part, and I think the new generation has it even more than I do, right? Like I'm what they call like a millennial, right? I'm dead center. And like, I think I'm right in the middle of like what a millennial is. And we were like this generation. Everyone was like, these kids are crazy. They're this, they're whatever it is. We grew up with seeing the rise of the internet, the creation of social media and everything. These new kids, it's like they don't know a world without it, right? So I feel like being able to write our own rules and did come with seeing people essentially create themselves out of nothing, and building personal brands became as important as major brands. And now all of a sudden you have someone from anywhere in the world that can become carve them a path, become who they want to be. And it's really democratized success in that sense. I think that may have helped for sure. I was very early to social media. Like when I was doing these all age club events, like, I mean, I had Friendster, right? And then I was on MySpace. I came up with this, like, I was like, wait, if this is the social standard of what success and fame is, how do you just, instead of trying to build it, why don't you just figure out a way to manipulate it, right? Like, and I realized I was like, they were called friends at the time. They weren't even followers. It's similar. I think Facebook's still like that, but they still have followers. But I was like, if people are MySpace famous, MySpace successful, and the threshold was like 10,000 people, right? I have 1 million followers on Instagram now, but back then it was 10,000 people. I just sat up all night and just added how many thousand people I had to do to get to 10,000. And I was just like, if this internet social media thing becomes like the standard, I got to figure out now how to focus on that and marketing more than anything. I did through that definitely probably neglect more monetary opportunities that other people did. And that's why there are a lot of people out there my age who have a lot more money than I am and always will. But ultimately, like, I focused on marketing, building a brand. I was like, if I build Jeremy Fall before I build the career aspect, then at least I can do whatever I want versus trying to, achieve success in this thing. That way I can carve my own path.
But at the same time, Jeremy Fall, it wasn't like you were just, it wasn't like the Jeremy Fall brand was empty and then you filled it up with followers and tweets and quotes and inspirational quotes and stuff like that. Like, you had a skill set. You were building bars, then nightclubs, then restaurants, and then changing the concept of what a restaurant brand is to include like art and creativity and so on. So in terms of, like, let's say advice you would give to someone now about building a personal brand, it's not like create something out of nothing. You had to create a brand. Couldn't be a lie. You had to have something backing it.
Yes and no. I mean, to a certain extent, like, and I appreciate that you're very generous with the compliments, but ultimately, I think that I was definitely the last one in my circle and around people that figured out what they wanted to do when they grew up. Right. I still have one of my biggest missions, and everything I do is reimagining the everyday, fucking the status quo, just really being in this like, you can be whatever you want. Like, I had no culinary training, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna open restaurants. I'm gonna learn. If you put me on a show right now competing on a technique against chefs, I would get my ass handed to me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's not what I do. Like, I came up with the ideas. I have a palette. Like, I'm creative. I did restaurants, but then people were like, started calling me a celebrity chef. And I was like, cool, whatever. I struggled in the beginning because I had, a lot of creatives struggle with defining themselves. It's like, if you ask, any creative that was known for being a musician, they're going to tell you they're not a musician because there are all these other things. So I think that's the thing that everyone shares. But for me, it was like, it was a long time. Like, there were so many people that just had no idea what I did for a living. And like, because I had the following, I had the connections. And then, I started doing bars and people like, oh, he's a club promoter. And all of a sudden it's like, like they started putting these buckets. And then it wasn't until like I was 26, 2016, that I was, and I know that's still young, but considering that by the time I was 26, I had been in nightlife for actually 10 years, because I started when I was 16 working in nightclubs, that I started getting this shape of what I was. I was a restaurateur, because even with the nightlife, like, there is no term like nightclub impresario. Like, it's just these weird things, right? So I became a restaurateur, then people labeled me as a chef or whatever it is. And then, like, that was a long time. Like, I still think that how you say the Jeremy Fall brand was probably less defined before that. And it started with not really anything before I was able to build it. Like, now am I an author? Like, yeah, you can add that to my thing because I did a book. But do you know what I mean? It's more like projects that have accumulated and people will define and add to my title. But I made it so that I could do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. I still struggle with it today. I think now I'm comfortable with just being me. And like, when every time I'm going to do an interview, they're going to be like, what title do you want in your name? And it's always going to make me cringe. So I'm always telling them, like, put whatever you want, because I don't know what to tell you, and they're like, okay, well, like, we'll just put chef or we'll put restaurant. I'm like, that's fine. That's what people need. That's cool. But it's, I'm starting to give a shit less and less, but that's recent. That's very recent.
It's probably recent because, like you said, like now you have the book, now you have NFT collections, and now you have, you know, you've been known for the restaurants and your creative approach to that. So you have the confidence that you're bringing into the brand. I bet you feel, you talk in the book about the chef thing and how you were asked to go on, the Food Network and cook some of the dishes from Nighthawk, and you felt imposter syndrome. I bet you don't feel imposter syndrome as much. I don't think it ever goes away, but I bet you don't feel as much right now.
No, I don't as much right now. That is very true. I actually wrote a short essay about it, it's called "Do You Know Who I Am?" And it was about like this thing in Hollywood and like not knowing who you are and stuff. This is the catchy title. But like if I look at you, right? Some people are gonna call you a writer. Your website says entrepreneur and angel investor. Your Wikipedia says hedge fund manager, podcaster.
Yeah, I can't describe what I do either. Like people say, "What do you do for a living?" There's no words for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, like to someone who is a hedge fund manager, like I might be your biggest nightmare because it's like putting capital behind something, or I might be the biggest breath of fresh air because you're investing in a person and that person is going to do what they do, right? But it's like if you look at things in black and white nature, or like how VCs look at things a lot of times, and it's just like quantifying growth and assessing risk, like, it's in that area. I've really noticed throughout my career, there are times where I've conflicted because I live in a reality that I've created. And a lot of times the traditional systems don't understand that reality. I had this really amazing deal with one of the most successful people in the world. And lasted about 6 months, we tried to get through it and we couldn't figure it out and not because there was anything wrong. Like we were both, everything was great and mutual and everything. It just was, I come from a world where I was like, if I want to be on TV and do a show, or if I want to do this, it doesn't necessarily need to flow through this entity because it's going to help it indirectly. And then they're used to, if you're a founder and you do, like, it's not the entertainment, the Hollywood, none of that stuff. Is if you're a founder, you're eating Doritos on the couch until this thing gets to $1 billion and you sell it and then whatever. But I was like, I have different expenses than that. So anyway, I might be going on a tangent, but all that to say, it's interesting to talk to someone like you because it sounds like you understand both sides of the equation.
Definitely, because I've been both on, let's say, the financial side and the very creative side, and also to something you said earlier resonates with me, which is that you could have done things like your peers and made potentially much more money, but instead you pursued the things you love. So I would go years at a time not doing the things that would maybe create the optimal amount of money, but you only live once and you have to, sometimes make sacrifices and do the things you love, or else your life's over.
Are you a spreadsheet person? Like, would you?
No.
Okay, so you're like a believe in the founder, here's a check kind of guy? Well, I probably shouldn't say it's that easy, but
yeah, it's not that easy. It's more like even when I invest, I have to invest in things that I think this is exciting and this is big and there's a potential for like huge return. But I'm not necessarily the type of person who enjoys investing. That's why, for me, investing is supposed to fuel the rest of my life. So I want it to be rare and infrequent. So it has to be special. So I have to be good at it. So it's as rare as possible.
That's really interesting.
Like if you have a gun with 10 bullets, when you shoot those bullets, you got to make sure you kill someone. So
that's the whole thing is like you go after what, like 100 and hope that like 10 do okay and 2 kill it. Like it's kind of that thing. It's a numbers game, right?
It's a numbers game, but I really want I like that's what they say about VCs is that only 1 out of 10 needs to be a winner or 2 out of 10. But I really aim for a 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
like I don't succeed in that, but that's what I really, really work hard to aim for, or because I know I'm not going to do a lot. Like a lot of VCs will just spread it around. I'm very, very, I don't do a lot of stocks at all. I'm just very focused on making sure I can enjoy other parts of my life.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
Like I owned a stand-up comedy club for a while, and I pursued stand-up comedy for years and years. That's not something a VC should do if they want to be a successful VC.
Well, why not?
No, I agree with you that why not? But if they're going to be a top venture capitalist and invest in the next Uber, probably they're not going to spend a lot of time hanging out in comedy clubs, which is what I did for many years. So it's all, there's give and take, there's sacrifice. And whether that shows up in a successful brand or changes your career in different ways, it almost doesn't matter to me. I kind of go, I'm like you, I think. I sort of go where the compass is pointing at that moment.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, and then Mark Cuban passed on Uber, so it's you wouldn't be the only one. But no, that's interesting. I think one of the biggest problems in fundraising is that it's too celebrated as a success. So
yeah,
people are like, "Congratulations, we raised $130 million." To me, like, that's a fucking liability. Like 100, I can't sleep at night if I owe someone $1,000, $100, like, let alone 130 million. I think at that point you can't even quantify because it's so much money, but it's too celebrated. And I think that like people are like, we haven't even launched yet, but congrats, champagne bottles, we raised all this money. It's like, okay, like that's great. But I have more respect for like the self-made, like the founder of Spanx. She sold with 100% of her equity. Like you don't need to raise money.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's been on the podcast, Sarah Blakely. I know her and her husband, and she was a hustler, and she wasn't hustling with venture capitalists. She was hustling with, Neiman Marcus and manufacturers and figuring out, like you, she wasn't a fashion designer, but she made one of the most popular fashion items on the planet. So, that's like grit and hustle. And I always think the best way to be an entrepreneurial success is just to simply be profitable day one, which is not as hard as people think. I mean, sure, you put up some upfront costs and you have to have a sense of how you're going to make that money back. But you're right. If there was one time I raised money and the next morning I woke up like scared to death, like anxious, because I wasn't 100% confident in the idea. And so I literally just returned the money and shut down the idea just because at that moment, I didn't think it would succeed.
And that takes a lot of intelligence, though, to do that and be able to identify, certain things. Like it's better than doing that than a lot of people would have just tried because it's not their money. I can't do that. And
I think this is somewhat related. Like this reminds me of a lot in the book you discuss your anxiety, and I've had this all my life, like since I was a kid, like just super anxious all the time, even at those moments when I'm happy. Like it's like almost a biological thing, or it is a biological thing. And, maybe you could talk about when you first realized this anxiety that you had was something you have to treat.
Yeah. I had anxiety my whole life. I didn't know what it actually was. So I didn't know I had to treat it. And then I found out I had anxiety in like my early 20s. Then I found out anxiety disorder in my mid 20s, just by like self-diagnosis, right? Like nothing professional. And then as I got, to my early 30s, it started becoming more and more crippling, right? So my whole thing with that is, I really decided to work on it, I would say when I was 30 or late, or about to turn 30. So I used to drive. I'd get really anxious. I would see a green light, I would be panicked, I would turn yellow. I saw yellow, I'd be panicked, turn red. It was just constant shit was just thrown at me all the time, anxiety. And, when it's all one, you don't realize the extent of it. You don't know what life can be without it. And then two, it just seems like the idea of rewiring your brain to live completely differently and think differently, it's a lot more intimidating than it sounds, right? And you don't know, so you don't know what's on the other side. I hadn't also understood that, my whole thing was I had fear. I'm going to lose my creativity, I'm going to lose my drive, I'm going to lose everything. But then I found out that you lose the spiral. You don't lose the anxious thoughts. I learned that through therapy and then through psychiatry. And then I decided to get medicated for it. But I was very anti-medication before. I was like, this is going to ruin my creativity. I'm going to lose my personality. I actually never felt more like myself after I got on medication. And, I was lucky that my therapist, my psychiatrist were two people that weren't pushing me to medicate. They were, at first they were like, I don't know if you even need it. And then as time passed, realized more and more that I needed it. And I'm on a very high dose of Lexapro now, but I'm also 6'7", right? So like it makes sense. But I was in the shower once. There was something that was bothering me, like for the last week, and I was in the shower and I thought about it, and I was just like, and then I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And I realized in that moment, I was like, holy shit, there's like if you think of it, like I would go have the anxious thought and then I would shoot down into a spiral. Now I just had the anxious thought and it kind of just vanished in the back of my head. And that was the weirdest feeling because it was something like that was bothering me every day. And that was the time where I think the medication started kicking in because it takes 6 weeks, a lot of times for it to fully kick in. So from there, it was just like.
Did you ever try like Xanax or Klonopin instead of Lexapro?
Yeah, so I had tried. Yes, Xanax is not something you take every day, but yes, I had.
But Klonopin's like the daily.
You can take Klonopin every day.
Yeah,
that sounds tense.
But it's a very addictive drug.
Yeah. I was gonna say I had Xanax before for like surgery and stuff like that, and like it definitely helps. But I'm basically high, right? Lexapro doesn't make you high. It's like a supplement, like the way you take vitamin C. Like you don't feel the vitamin C, but it's just there working its thing in the background. I have no problem taking Lexapro every day for the rest of my life. There are a lot of these things with pharmaceuticals being addictive and whatnot. And obviously, that's like a very serious thing. I think that taking a pill that helps your anxiety, that you essentially. And look, I'm not a doctor, so by no means am I like pushing medication. I think it worked for me. Everyone has their own journey. I know people who can meditate. I wish I could meditate. I can't. Or I don't think I can as of this moment. But with that said, like I to me, if it helps and it isn't detrimental, if the positive really outweighs the theoretical negative, then for me it's worth it, right? It's just like, am I going to pop a Klonopin or Xanax every day? No, because that's a more dangerous. I actually didn't even know that Klonopin is something you could take daily. By the way, I just found this out right now with you. But like that's obviously like it's not as recommended. Like Lexapro is really like one of the, or Zoloft, whatever, is one of the more mild ones, you could say, I guess. Is it even mild?
I don't know. Like I in 2010, I was both going broke or close to going broke and super anxious to the point where I couldn't function at all. Like I was just up all night, like the guy from A Beautiful Mind, writing numbers down and trying to figure out if I was going to go broke or not. And my doctor prescribed Klonopin, and it was both the best and the worst thing because it like blocks anxious thoughts. Like you almost can't think an anxious thought. And so I was able to be productive again, but it's so addictive and it is long-term detrimental that, you have to be very careful. So, Lexapro is definitely a different family of drugs.
Are you still on Klonopin?
I'm still weaning off of. I mean, I basically stopped my anxiety at a very high dose in 2010, and it's taken like a decade or more to wean off from it.
Wow.
Like it's dangerous to get off it too fast. At least that's what I've had experienced was when I tried to get off too fast, it's almost worse than never having. It is definitely worse than never having had taken it.
That's what I've heard.
Like you could have seizures, the whole thing. Yeah.
Wow. So
but and also there's long-term like side effects that we'll see if I experience, but it shouldn't be a long-term solution for anybody. I think, again, not being a doctor as well, but it was a very good short-term solution. I'll say that, but long-term it's not.
10 years is having to wean off. I mean, I applaud you for that. That's courageous to wean off over that long.
No matter how small I get the dosage, like every 6 months, I kind of cut the dosage in half. No matter how small I get it, if I ever try to just zero it, I start getting all the side effects immediately. So it's horrible.
Wow.
And I haven't really talked about it actually. So it's and I can see this too. Like after this podcast, I'm meeting my daughter who's about to graduate college, and she seems to have inherited my anxiety. And she's a very happy person, except when I can see those moments of anxiety happen. And it's like almost, a biological thing, or again, it probably is a biological thing because she inherited exactly what I had. So
no, absolutely. I mean, look, I don't know if you have an addictive personality as well, but obviously that plays a factor too. I have one. It's in my genes. So I mean, that also always got to be careful of like any sort of things like that. Have you tried microdosing mushrooms?
I haven't, and a lot of people recommend that to me. One friend of mine, who's been on this podcast many times, has totally recommended it. in every possible way.
Yes.
And people, many, well-known people have publicly, Tim Ferriss is a big advocate of microdosing. A lot of people are well-known advocates of microdosing, and I should try that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I'm someone who had a cannabis edible when I was like 21 and almost went to the hospital because I had a meltdown. So never touched weed or anything. I'm very sensitive to those kinds of things, and I can microdose mushrooms. So like that's when you know that it's like, you know, that
Do you
like
do it every
and
day?
for me it works. No, but I could. The thing I have says every 2 to 3 days, but I absolutely could every day. It doesn't slow down my ability to function. To be honest, my tolerance is very high because I'm on Lexapro. So I know it like reduces the effect of it. There's some SSRIs that reduce the effect of it, but it's but it does work though, and it's in the back of your head. It's not like you take it and then you're like in like Xanax, like you feel it hit, right? But mushrooms, they're just kind of like in the back of your head. Like it's kind of like Lexapro in the sense that like you don't feel high from it, but it's just there doing its job.
This is such a valuable service for all business owners, big businesses, small businesses, doesn't matter. I wish I had this in the many different businesses that I've started. Sometimes it seems like your business is humming, but then suddenly you don't understand it. You're starting to fall behind. You're not understanding where your costs are, where your revenues are, where your payments are. Teams are buried in all sorts of like BS work, and you can't seem to close the books. So you need like one dashboard, one source of truth. I'm jealous of this business, NetSuite from Oracle, of course, NetSuite by Oracle. I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's a brilliant concept to have all your business intelligence on one dashboard. This is why you need to know these three numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. So 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the number one cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind. So you get a customized solution for all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow all in one place. So right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/James. That's netsuite.com/James to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/James. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass
on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. I'm curious, like, how much of the anxiety you think might also be related to your choice of what to do in life? Like, being
Yeah.
involved in the nightlife, and like you mentioned, one of your early ventures, the King Eddie Saloon, the downtown LA bar that you
Skid Row, yeah.
that you reopened. That sounded like a pretty stressful experience. You mentioned early on in that 2 people who you worked with actually committed suicide. Like, what was happening?
Yeah, I mean, the nightlife world can be very depressing. Like bars, I mean, it's late hours, it's alcohol. Like I actually grew up right off of Skid Row. So I had gone back there. It was very close to where I grew up, this bar, like very like blocks away, right?
Hmm.
So it was cool. I was like, oh, I'm back where I was. And then I was kind of like, this is shit, dude. Like it's sad. It's, I came back, I restored the bar. People were writing rest in peace, Jeremy Fall on the walls. Like,
By the way, I just want to interrupt there. R.I.P. Jeremy Fall. That would be a great name for a restaurant too. As soon as I saw that in the book, I thought, he should. I wonder why if he thought about making that the name of the restaurant and leaving that graffiti up.
I mean, there's a lot of people I'm sure that dislike me out there that would go to that place. But yeah, I mean, it was I think it was definitely very hard on the psyche. A lot of these, again, late shifts, like it's very dark, right? It's dark, drinking, people are depressed. Like there's a lot of these like bars, these local dive bars, especially that people that I think it really rubs off on you, right? Like from the second you like park your car and walk down the street, and like it was a very sad environment. Yeah, 2 of the employees committed suicide very closely apart. And then, my business partner, Jared, committed suicide. Years later, we weren't partners anymore, but a few years ago committed suicide. It's a world that will really eat you alive. Like even in restaurants, like, I mean, I have been on the cover of magazines. I have been, again, on TV and all these things. And regardless, and even like with the rise of the celebrity chef, the options are really praise or you're treated like absolute shit, right? Unfortunately, you're treated like shit more often than not, right? And that's something I never tolerated in any of my places, especially now with my staff. Like I would take someone treating me like shit over anyone else really that's ever worked for me. But there's still this idea that you're a servant. I am there, I'm paying, you're here to serve me. I'm the only person that matters in this restaurant. I know better than you. If this is not good, this dish is not good. It's not that it's not to my liking. It's just bad. There's a lot of this mentality that's like weighs you down, and especially in like high intensity environment where you're moving around and like there's a high. Like I can't name a lot of people that leave a restaurant shift or a bar shift and aren't completely awake when they leave, right? This adrenaline, like, so it takes a lot of you. You do work weird hours when you're asleep, people are awake and vice versa. And like, you don't have weekends. Weekends are your busy time. It's just like, it's a very weird way of living. It's very passion driven, right? And I'm talking about like when this is your career, not when you're a wealthy attorney and you have a restaurant as an investment. I don't know why you never know this restaurant, but as you have that as as like a hobby or a passion, like that's different. When it's your career, and no matter what side of it you are, and obviously people tend to, like I said, the praising side tends to increase. Like if you're on TV and stuff, that's just like human nature. But it's a very exhausting, career. Like I have friends of mine. I was talking to a friend of mine who's like a very known chef, and he was just like, I'm going to be on the road until I'm fucking 70, like 75, like checking on the restaurants, working the line. And it's like, even when you're successful in just straight culinary, in terms of just straight restaurants, like there's not enough money. There's money where you can live well, but there's not enough money that you can put away some massive retirement to then be able to stop early, right? And retire. That's why all these chefs go for a lot of TV, consumer package, like products are a great revenue stream. Like that's what a lot of them end up going to, that because you become more, you go into the branding business and not the restaurant business anymore. It's a different world.
So that's what I mean, is that could that up the chances of an anxiety disorder triggering being in that sort of business, as opposed to, let's say, being a lawyer, where of course that's a big anxious sort of business, but there's a path, there's a well-known, a well-trodden path. You work a lot of hours, you take on a lot of cases, you make partner, and then you ease into retirement.
Yeah, I think everyone in the business has had a moment where they've done something that's not themselves. Like there is a time where I was throwing pans and knives at and it made its way across to the other restaurants, because every general manager messaged me and was like, are you okay? Because like it wasn't something that I would do. Like I've always been pretty strict and I like things done a certain way, but I'm like, I've never been like one to scream, one to throw shit. Like that's just not the way I've done things ever. And it was just like a really specific situation where I just lost my mind in, this was before I was medicated too, but lost my mind because I had asked for things done multiple times. It was really important. And essentially some of the team members were rude to one of my other employees, like extremely rude. And then when I came in, they were taking selfies instead of like working, like their own asses. Like it was like an extreme case, right? Like, and I just like lost my shit. I started yelling and throwing shit. No HR complaint because it was so unlikely. No one even filed anything. It was just like shit for Jeremy to do that. Like we fucked up badly, So,
one thing that's really fascinating with what you do is that with your personal brand, it's not like just being a chef. Like take Wolfgang Puck. We know he's a chef. We know he's a chef more than we know he's a restaurateur. Like he's a chef's chef. And, so he brands that in various ways. Could sell cookbooks, could sell products, could sell sauce, whatever. And, but you've taken that brand in a different direction, which is it's almost like food and having a restaurant is an outlet for your creativity. Oh, but here's another outlet doing NFTs. Here's another outlet. Like what is this record label deal you just worked on?
Yeah, so it's funny because all of it has a food through line, whether it was obvious or not. So the record label, it's called Probably Label. I co-own the record label with Warner Records. And our last project is we dropped a pizza concept pop-up with Adidas called Probably Pizza. And it was in New York and we did branded boxes. Everything was it's very much in the collector mentality, situation. But I use food as a platform for creativity, for conversation. And so it's something universal, everyone eats. So for me, I'm going to use this to do whatever I want, really, right? And from there, kind of rewrite the rules. Like my last restaurant mixtape was a collaboration. It was like my mixtape of like how a musician would do it in restaurant form. I had dishes that featured artists that collaborate on. I had Quincy Jones, a collaborator, Vic Mensa, Jaden Smith at the time, Brandon Boyd from Incubus, Serge Tankian from System of a Down. Like I took a bunch of different people together that you wouldn't expect, and they all did things they would normally do. A lot of them sketched, drew, paint, Surge did like a statue of a recycled Yamaha keyboard into a lamp. And it was, when you walked in, the way I'm describing it is not what you would expect. You expect like this, like all this random shit, but we integrated to the decor where it was like you're peeling layers to an onion, you'd be eating and be like, what is that? Wait, what's that? Quincy Jones, like the musician. And then you walk around, it's like, it would create conversation with the servers. It was really layering the experience as much as possible. And I like to do things like that that are different. You know, a lot of things have not necessarily been successful or haven't been understood or people, but they've always moved it forward. I remember there was this I think it was the Hollywood Reporter that said that my larkish sensibility was both that some people found it grating and some people found it like there's some like really hilarious lingo. It was like some people find it like endearing and some find it grating or something like that. But
it's interesting to even do collaborations with like Quincy Jones in a kind of a restaurant type of atmosphere. Like what was that collaboration, or what was like a specific example of one of these collaborations?
Well, yeah, so Quincy actually did a sketch, like a drawing that was like hung up on the wall. It was like pretty simple. It was a cool sketch. You know, I did a lot of, they all did something different, right? A lot of it was art though, that we'd use as decor.
Did anyone suggest a recipe?
Yeah, I had some artists that were, Toki Monster actually had a Korean collaboration influence on one of the dishes. So I had like actual features on the dishes, which was cool. People are like, oh, I don't know how to cook. I'm like, I don't care. Give me ideas. Like, that's like, this the whole point is to just kind of fuck around. But it's funny because for Nighthawk, when I first opened it, I got shit on. I got like praise and shit on. I was getting like dubbed in Japanese and in like Vogue, like, and all these different things. But I got a lot of people that are like, there's articles that are like, is this a restaurant? Is this a bar? It can't make up its mind. And I really realized, I was like, damn, the industry is really fucking narrow-minded. Like food is the industry that lacks the most innovation in all of culture. We're making flying cars, and like music went from like cassettes to CDs to streaming, and fashion evolves faster than it's just like, and food is, it's the same shit over and over again. And like, this was when I dropped Nighthawk, all of LA was kale salads, hamachi crudos, charred octopus. Every menu was the same. It was like, we have craft beer, we have an old fashioned with almonds, we have an old fashioned with walnuts. It was the same shit every time. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna drop carbs, and I'm gonna do spiked cereal milk, I'm gonna do breakfast for dinner. And then it got praised and shit on. The same week was like, I think it was LA Weekly that was like, what is this? This is ridiculous. Jeremy must be a pothead. This whole thing that was literally in this article. I got best restaurant in America the exact same week. And then I ran into the writer at an event, and then she was like, oh, hey, like whatever, like, well, obviously. And then I like show the article up, and I have two phones. So I showed the article up and I showed the other thing, and then I just did answer it, and that was it. And I was just like, I don't mind criticism. I actually enjoy it. I love being proven wrong, sorry. Because it teaches me how much I have to learn. And I'm stubborn in a lot of ways, but when it comes to learning and growth, like, I love to be proven wrong. But I like when there's backing and educated explanations, and it's not just pointing at a business because you didn't like it, or it wasn't, or it wasn't what you expected. And then you have this platform to bash businesses when it's already hard enough. And I was lucky to be on the good side of it, the side that got pressed, the side that I have a following and everything. I look at it for the people that don't and start in such a hard industry. And that takes a hit. Like, people don't realize how Yelp reviews, like how much that affects restaurants. When there's a bad Yelp review, the entire restaurant is talking about it. All the employees are like, did you see that 1 star? Like, it really fucks with us, like, more than people realize, So you grow thicker skin over time. But, I think that stuff always upset me, definitely, because, I would take it personally when it was like not constructive.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing though with Nighthawk is that, and this relates to what you said earlier, that we can have flying cars, but the restaurant industry is like the same old thing. That also leaves room for a lot of innovation, which is what you did. Like the concept of, you have this concept in the book, which I like a lot. And I've called it something else in the past, but you call it paper clipping. The idea of taking two good ideas and combining them to create a perhaps better idea or at least interesting attempt. I call it idea sex, where you take breakfast food and put it at dinner, or let's take sushi and put it inside a burrito and it's a sushi rito or whatever. And I like how you ran with that in the food space, and it gives you kind of this license for creativity that is unique and welcome in the food industry.
Yeah, it's welcome. I always was careful to not get into the hot Cheeto covered donut shit. Like that was just like the unnecessary. We're gonna force this for viral content. Like it was a thing in the beginning. Like now I'm kind of like, okay, we don't have to do that. And I actually was part of starting the crazy cereal trend. Like after we launched it, we were getting knocked off all over the world. So I was a part of that problem to a certain extent, but not in the same way. Like everything, we always made everything from scratch. We were always like, my chefs were all like came from fine dining, right? Like that was always like the way we went. So it was different whether you realize it was subtle, So yeah, that, to me, I think innovation doesn't have to be completely reinventing the wheel. I think where it's not welcome in food, contrary to popular belief, is like, people, self-proclaimed foodies, as much as I hate that word, all those people, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I went to this restaurant. They had like this crazy dish, etc. I had the chicken and the Caesar salad. Like it's a lot of times you have to have those to make it's singles for music, right? It's like you have the commercial radio hit and then you can do the stuff you actually want to release, right? But you always need to have those hits, like you always do. And the problem is it's such an expensive endeavor. Like if a musician wants to do this like very dark album, like Brian Jones from the Stones did like a Moroccan album that like was completely unsuccessful, but who cares? Because he could and he could do it, right? Like I'm not in a position where I can go into some weird ass restaurant like today, sign a lease. It's going to cost $20,000 to $30,000 a month in Los Angeles, put people's jobs on the line, run a $40,000, $50,000 a month payroll, and you just can't. It's too capital intensive before you even open the doors, right? And the margins are very low. Like I always tell people this, I'm like, food does not cost what it should. I know the numbers. And sometimes people are like, wow, this place is expensive. And I'm like, sure, it is. But I'm telling you what it costs. And it's not like they're raking in millions of dollars in profit. Like by the time you get food, people don't realize they're like, oh, well, I don't understand. Like I can buy a bun, I can buy this, and make it at home. It's like, well, first of all, you should do that. But second of all, there's so much overhead, line cooks, chefs, like before it gets to your plate, there's so much labor, so many things that go into it. And they're making it times 200-300 a day, right? When it's successful. So people, like, food does not cost what it should cost. And when I'm saying this like from a restaurant experience, right? I think that a lot of times people don't realize that. I think that food obviously is a means of survival and there should be options that are affordable. Like everyone needs to be able to eat, but you're on this like in between where, these two things need to coexist. And I think the standard of like what food should cost is too democratized for people to understand because they don't have context, where they're like, I can get a bowl of pasta here and a bowl of pasta here. It should cost the same thing. It's like, it's very different, right? So there's so much context and lack of understanding of how a lot of these operations work. So that's where I disagree, where food doesn't welcome that much innovation. It does if you, James, are coming to my house. I'm like, I'm going to try this shit and like cook it. But if I were to try to commercialize it, like, it's hard. And if I showed you the numbers as a angel investor, you would be like, fuck that. Like we're not trying this.
I believe you. Like I've been not in that industry like you have, obviously, but I've looked into that industry, and it is a very difficult business, which is why brand is so important, because you have to have people want to go to your restaurant, not just for the food, but for many reasons. They have the more reasons they have for wanting to go to your restaurant, essentially the better it is for the business in a lot of ways, not just pricing, but recurring revenues and so on. So it's a tough business. And
it's very hard.
But again, that's why it's great how you've been able to take your personal branding in this industry, and now get the record label, do something with CNN. Whether or not it's profitable is not as important as the experience and building the brand, extending the story into all these other outlets. And that's really good advice for people to observe and see how you've worked with it. I'm curious on the one thing about the anxiety disorder that I'm always curious about is, when do you know the difference between something's a disorder and something's just anxiety? Like, again, you're in a very anxious type of business, the nightlife, the restaurant business. What you just described was almost an anxiety inducing kind of
Yeah.
having a discussion about pricing with customers. And, that'll raise the anxiety of anybody. So how do you know when something goes from just a lot of anxiety to disorder?
Yeah, I that's a great question. I think it's when it starts having a negative impact on your overall life outside the situations that directly give you anxiety, right? So to explain, if it's like, oh, I'm anxious because I'm figuring out prices, that's one thing. If it's I'm sitting at home on the couch and I feel anxious and I'm not sure why, I think that's a disorder. I was feeling anxious for no reason. And then it was accentuated with reasons, right? So driving and thinking the light's going to go yellow, there was really sure, that's a reason, quote unquote, but there was no really direct correlation as to why I should be panicking if the light was being yellow, considering I've been driving for like 15 years. 18 years, 17. So there's no reason that I should be, panicking about stuff like that or anxious. Like, I would be anxious for no reason. Like, I'd be like, why am I anxious? And I wouldn't even notice it. People would be like, you okay? And I was like, yeah, why do you think I'm not okay? It's like, it was a very weird thing. Like, so yeah.
And how is it affecting your relationships at the time?
Oh my God, it was a disaster. I shouldn't say it like that dramatically. It was tough for them. You know what I mean? Like, I definitely, especially I've been in relationships where the other party was anxious as well. So that's always a great combo. But, I think I commend the people that were with me through all that. Like, I owe everyone who was with me, friends, romantic relationships, family, like, looking back, I'm like, fuck, like this is a lot, like, person trying to build something. Cause it's like blind confidence, a little bit of insanity, and like naivete to believe that you're literally can do these things better than anyone, and like rewrite the rules for like an industry that's existed for centuries. And there's definitely a lot of blind confidence and naivete, I would say. And then on top of that, being anxious that things aren't going to go well, and being so anxious that things do go well because there's no room for error. And like, that's a lot to be around. That doesn't like scream like Netflix and chill hell.
And did you feel like you wanted to write this book because you've gotten through the other side of it, or is it sort of an ongoing process of dealing with this, anxiety? Even though you're taking the medication, you're going to the therapy, do you still find that the battle rages, although it's more moderated now?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, like, it's definitely gotten better now, mainly because of medication, right? I mean, I would say that that's definitely been the main thing, but I don't know. I really don't know. I think I don't know. I actually don't know.
Yeah, I think it's hard to know because you don't really know what other people are experiencing in terms of anxiety. So you don't know. And obviously, again, your business, industry, life in general is anxiety inducing. But, and you don't know what you would be like if you weren't on the medication. So it's hard I agree, it's a hard question to answer.
It definitely attributed to my success for sure. It definitely did. It still does, I decided to write the book because I was just at home and I was like, I got to get off of Instagram and like really having mental health issues. And I came back 2 months later after I did a post about it, and tons of people responded. People I didn't follow me, that I didn't follow, celebrities, a lot of men. And I was like, shit, like, this was needed. And I guess it was during a time where the pandemic, everyone was home and more focused on having the time to actually respond to these things. So it was like that day I decided to write the book, and then that was it.
I also can't imagine the sort of going into a pandemic with a bunch of restaurants and having your brand around restaurants. Every restaurant shut down. I mean, fortunately, there was these bailouts that helped restaurants and restaurant employees and so on. But I'm sure that was a stressful time.
I sold my company at the end of 2019. I had no more restaurants by the time we hit the pandemic. So I had gone acquired in 2019. So I didn't have to deal with any of that.
Oh, that's good. So, and so right now, what are your main things that you're working on? Where can people find the latest stuff that you're involved in?
Instagram's probably the best thing. Honestly, Instagram, social media, that's where I post all my stuff. I have this like vision. And actually, I haven't even talked about this yet, so it's kind of nice. But I have this vision to make organic cool. And like it has its place in the fitness and the health industry. But there are a lot of things like, I started like taking a burger, for example, and I was like, if I break this up, like there's no reason a burger should be that unhealthy. It's meat, sure. Sauces shouldn't be as unhealthy as they are, like at all. Bread can be fine. Like there's nothing in there that really should be that bad for you. Like it's just when you're cooking a patty in its own juices and adding butter and oil and it's canola oil, like there's like just a lot of those things that are added are bad. So I started thinking about sauces is one of the big things, and I'm I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, but like that's essentially what my new thing is just kind of recreating some of these hits, giving people that comfort food, but stuff that's not going to kill them, and like doing that as consumer packaged goods and et cetera.
What I like about this too is this relates to some of your earliest memories on being involved in food, like when you made spicy ketchup when you were 12 years old. So
that's one of the sauces.
Okay, good. And I'm sure you have the Bloody Mary ketchup and things like that.
Yeah.
It's good to connect your memories of your nostalgia with your reality. And that's what you're doing with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll send you some stuff. I'd love for you to try it and see what it is. It's really cool. It's, I'm like very obsessed with punk culture and kind of that, punk culture very much mimics this lawless, break the rules, do whatever you want in like a non-cheesy way. But like, I really like that era, what that did to open the doors to a lot of different ideas and music. And there's something about that I connect to. So that's a huge inspiration for all this food.
I feel very much like you're inspired, and this is just a gut impression, but not like pure punk, but punk when it merged with both rap and metal, like a Rage Against the Machine. So you even have a chapter, Rage Against the Hype Machine.
Yes.
And earlier in this podcast, you asked, are we allowed to cuss? I'm sure you remember when the BBC asked Rage Against the Machine, hey, do a song, but don't curse. And the entire song, Zach De La Rocha was saying basically, F you, don't tell me, I forget the exact words though. F you, I'll do what I want to. F you, I'll do what I want. That's the only verse in the entire song. And actually it was a very melodic song, so it was good. But they're one of my favorite bands. So anyway, Jeremy Fall, author of Falling Upwards. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Your book's an inspiration. I really love what you're doing and love the directions you've taken the brand. And your book's really inspirational in a lot of different ways in terms of creativity, discussing mental illness and anxiety, and discussing your specific businesses. It's very, very inspirational. I encourage people to check it out. 2 of my daughters are either waitresses or promoters or have done a mixture of all these different things. I've owned a bar in my life. When I owned a comedy club, it was also a bar. And it's completely different than owning a nightclub or a restaurant, but I have a sense of the anxiety of the business. And it's just an area that I've always been interested in. So I appreciate you writing about it and coming on the show and discussing, the anxiety issues as well.
Get everything you need for your holiday meal at Whole Foods Market. Right now, you'll find animal welfare certified rib roast on sale. It's a deliciously crowd-pleasing centerpiece. Plus, save on spiral sliced ham, bone-in lamb, and seasonal produce like sweet potatoes and Honeycrisp apples. For ready-to-eat sides, head to the prepared food section. Done. And remember that Whole Foods Market caters. Order gourmet catering at shop.wfm.com. Bring the holiday magic with Whole Foods Market.
Diving deep into your passions has never been easier. Thanks to Amazon Prime. You get all-in-one access to the things you need, so you can get more out of the things you love. With a range of services including Prime Video, Amazon Music, and Prime Fast free shipping. Amazon Prime is like your personal mission control for all the things that inspire. From shopping and streaming to saving, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into. It's on Prime.